Good morning. This is Carl Dakin, and this is the Successful Funding Show. With me this morning, I have as my guest Eric Hansen. This show is all about funding. When we talk about funding, we're talking about entrepreneurs, inventors, small businesses, community projects, government programs, charities, all who need money to move forward their idea, their project, their cause, trying to do something where they need more resources than they currently have in hand. The purpose of this show is to share knowledge of myself and my guest on how to raise funding, how to position yourself to be most attractive, how to develop a funding strategy that will allow you a higher probability of getting the funding you need, but also reducing the time and money that is often invested, more often wasted, chasing the wrong people, talking to the wrong people about what you're trying to do. So, with that today, this is part 5 of a series that I started a few weeks ago called Fact Checking. And the point of this show is that when an investor is looking at a deal, they want to see information that allows them to complete the circle, wrap their brain around it, and make an investment. And they're going to be looking at different information that should be present, ready, and available, convenient, concise, and understandable. And I use all those terms because that doesn't happen all that often. So the first show we did, we focused on the management team. In the second show, we talked about the entity or structure within which the business would be conducted. In the third show, I talked about technology, the innovation, proof of benefit or purpose of a particular product or service. Last week, Eric, along with Ron Yeager, joined me, and we talked about market acceptance. The fact that you have something doesn't mean anybody will buy it. And today we're going to talk about economic feasibility, which in shorthand means that after you sell the product or service there and you pay all your expenses, there's some money left over, or at the very worst, you've broke even on this. And this seems, again, to some people are going, well, that's silly. And I'm going, no, it wouldn't be silly if I didn't see so many deals where they get into the product, the market, and they find out that they're not making a profit because they didn't understand all the costs and expenses associated with bringing something. And the net result is they lose money and the business fails or the project fails. So, what we want to talk about today is what does it mean to be economically viable, economically feasible? How would you go about showing and telling that story? One, prove to yourself before you get too far deep into it, but also how would you communicate that to an investor? And very importantly, as we've talked about throughout this entire series, you can tell investor candidates anything you want to tell them, but it's more important that you have somebody else who will verify, validate, certify, or otherwise prove that they have an objective third party and professional opinion that this is all true and correct. Because your opinion, even if you're the smartest person in the world on your innovation, is biased inherently, and investor candidates are going to see more than that. So, with that, we do have a chat room. Anyone who's viewing this morning is invited to comment, to ask questions as we go along, and we'll get right into this. So, Eric, just as a starting point, explain to the audience what you think when I use the term economic feasibility, and then we'll get into more detail on this.
Yeah, so in my world, feasibility doesn't mean that you make profit on day one. In fact, you may not even make profit in the first year to even in some cases 5 years. But you have to be able to have a roadmap that in this time frame where you're building out your product line, your product, whatever it is, that you know in say, we'll just use 1 year. In 1 year, I'm going to have the ability to have positive cash flow to my product. If it's a manufacturing product, there's oftentimes manufacturing products don't yield any, you know, feasible, understandable results for over a year. If you're doing a service, that service better be profitable within months because that's a different animal. Okay. So the feasibility in my world comes down to upfront things. Can I have contracts in place if it's a service or manufacturing that allow me to get to a pre-designed goal number one? If my goal number one is I think I have to have a storefront, because I'm a service business and visibility that way makes sense. How are you going to get there? How much is it going to cost? How much do I have to have in reserves? Because you can't work for free. And that's probably the biggest thing I see people do is they think that they can work for absolutely free for say 6 months, basically liquidating most likely their entire life savings. It doesn't work because then you're cash strapped and you can't go forward, right? You now are stuck in a rock and a hard place, and the hard place is going to win. And so that would be my first thing about your feasibility. Do I have enough cash on hand to make it the full distance? If you do not have enough cash on hand and you can't get funding to get you cash on hand, you do not have a feasible operation. That's really just the first basics.
So to add some detail and I'll create a prequel to the movie that Eric just described. Um, the first thing I do when somebody comes to me with an innovation or idea is I ask them to create what I call as a business model. And a business model is to identify, describe cost, everything that needs to be done to sell the product or service one time. So, this is an important thing that from talking with different clients, because if you go through the drill, you go, everything I need to have to make this one sale. Maybe I need that storefront there it's talking about, but if I sold one product, you're immediately going, wow, that is probably going to create a loss because I've got all this rent, overhead, staffing, whatever, and I only have the revenue from a single sale. But what I found is a common mistake of entrepreneurs and people getting ready to launch a new idea is they jump out ahead and they go, well, what if I sold 10,000 of these? And I remember seeing a presentation by the founder of LinkedIn who said that their runway before achieving profitability was projected. They had to have 10,000 participants on LinkedIn before they knew they had a viable, feasible business. And the problem is between the first person or first sale and 10,000 can be a long, arduous, and sometimes impossible path to follow. But if you start with one and you know everything that goes into making the first sale, then you have, in my mind, a better ability to project when break even may occur, when you may become profitable. So, as Eric was describing, it may take a business months and years before the volume of sales is rises to a level with profitability on each sale that it in fact makes the entire business profitable. So when you start out of the box, you have a lot of capital costs. You may have to buy equipment, you may have to hire people, you may have to rent that building, you have all these expenses. And you need them in place on day one in order to start your business. And then over time, as sales increase and money starts coming in, there will be this convergence, so to speak, where the two lines come together. And now your revenue and your expenses are equal. That's break even. The next day, hopefully, another sale comes in and pushes it into that first profitability. And a lot of times, as I said, I've seen people put out prospectuses and they don't start on day one. They don't start with a single sale. They start with that 10,000 unit model. And you're going, well, that's all well and nice anyone had 10,000 sales, then they're a long ways down the road. But as an investor, my concern is, can you get to that 10,000 threshold? Because as Eric described, if you decide that, hey, I'm going to invest in my company, I'm not going to take a salary or other compensation until I get to 10,000, you may have enough money to get from here to there. You may not. And as we apply the rule of Murphy, everything takes twice as long and is three times as hard. If it takes you 12 months to get to profitability and you only had enough money for 6 months, at the end of 12 months, you not only may fail the business, you may fail your personal relationships, you may make a number of people unhappy, which would include all the investors that you've invited to the party that you're throwing. So what I suggest is, at the very, even if you're already in business, I often tell people go back, look at a single sale, make sure you've got everything that you could possibly imagine as a cost. And that includes not only the cost that you want to spend, but the things you may not want to, like paying for insurance or paying for an attorney to represent you if somebody makes a claim, or allowing for a tariff to change your entire pricing structure, and then back again, like a tennis match that flips flop back and forth from day to day. So if you do that, then one, you get a better understanding of exactly what's necessary to complete the deal. But now you have a better foundation or platform to do your projections for. How many sales do you need to make at this level before you break even? How many is necessary? Don't assume that you're going to get there. You need to know what they are. You need to know what the milestones are along the way in order to get to that point. But I've also seen people go, "Hey, I'm profitable," and I'm going, "Then why is it not showing up on your books and records?" What? How did you get to profitability? And it turns out that maybe they're not using GAAP accounting principles. Yeah, you're laughing, but I'm not, because you're sitting there going, no, no, no. In fact, one of the most common places where this arises is a person wants to sell their business. And they go, look, here's my revenue. I want a multiplier of my revenue as a price point for my business. I want to sell it. And then the person says, well, how much money are you taking out of the business? And they're going, well, that's totally different. You go, no, it's not, because if they buy the business and they pay someone to replace you, then at that point in time, you've diminished the profitability of the business. It doesn't have the value you think it does. And this goes on and on. There's so many points along the path where you can get up and get started in small scale, but you can't grow the business because you have to add people, add infrastructure, add other costs to get to that higher level. So you may be economically feasible as what we would call a lifestyle business or a mom and pop business, and all that's all good. But if you think that you're going to become rich in that small business, going to happen, because you have to make enough profits to pay back investors, pay for the money for growth, and still get to yet a higher threshold where you're still making a profit. So Eric, what would you do if somebody came to you and they tell you, "Hey, I have a profitable business, or I'm going to have a profitable business"? How would you go about trying to nail that down, to create a statement that you could show to an investor candidate, and one that would be credible, something that they could lean on and make an investment? What would you put together?
So the very first thing I would look at, and I can use an example that came across my desk the other day, and there was these two young kids, and what they were doing is, it was kind of fun, but let's get down to, is it profitable? They had a novel idea of strapping their skis to their ski racks with them on it, doing 60 miles an hour down the highway with themselves strapped to the hood of a ski rack. And in fact, they had a few pictures of this, and they did them up really nice. And they said, this is going to be a great thing for ski shops. These ski shops are going to buy these. We're going to have them in big glossies, all this stuff, right? So my very first thing I asked was, when you went and did that, did you have any kind of insurance to cover you if something happened? And of course, the answer was from this 18 to 22-year-old kids was, well, no, we don't need that. And I said, well, what what's going to happen when that ski rack breaks off the roof of that BMW and you get smashed by another car? Who's going to pay for this mess? I said, because you clearly don't have any money. So when you're talking about fact checking and the importance of that, let's start with some real basic things. You know, if I can, will you do? Or do you have? If not, do you plan on having? And those are just basics, right? And when they don't have those and they express, that probably isn't really important in our business, then I think you have to do a hard stop, because you're dealing with someone who doesn't understand besides killing themselves, the gravity of the situation ahead of them. And this works in almost any form, right? Do you have B&O insurance? Or do you plan to have B&O insurance? Yes, and I've talked to my guy at State Farm, and he says, once we're at this stage, I need it. Well, that's a positive sign, right? So that would be my initial, very first out of the gate. Ask some questions that they should have answers to, that are simple. And if they don't have answers, they're willing to learn. And I think, Carl, that's something that's really important. You can't expect people new to business to know it all, because I don't know it all. And I've been in business for the better part of 45 years, right? And I'm still learning every day. So you can't expect them to learn it all. You don't expect them to know it all, but you do expect them to be open to suggestion. So fact check some basics. Are they open for suggestion? And then if the answer is no and no, then the answer is, God, have yourself a great day. It was wonderful meeting you, and I wish you all the luck in the world.
So you make a point that I like to emphasize is anytime you start a new business, even if it looks like it's an old business and you're just doing it again, and I use the example of a coffee shop all too often, but there are thousands and thousands of coffee shops out there. But if you started a coffee shop today, you would have to ask yourself, is this different than a coffee shop that was started a year ago? Do the tariffs impact me? Do the droughts in the countries where coffee is growing going to impact me? Is there a local roaster who's going to sell to someone else at a better price than me for me to get my coffee? Or do I have to roast my own? Do I know how to roast coffee? Do I understand that roasting coffee creates multiple flavors that some people like and dislike? We could go through this list, and anytime you do something new, as you described it, you don't know it all. And one of the things that I look for when a company comes across my desk is I start asking the question, well, who's on your team? Who has more experience than you? Who has a different perspective or background than you? If I saw somebody putting skis on a roof of a car or on something like that, I'm reminded of a college experience where we put some rowing shells on top of a car and realized that the luggage racks on the car were not built for anything more than 10 pounds of weight. Uh, and very expensive lesson to be learned. But um, a lot of luggage racks are almost no more than I'll call artistic. They don't have a lot of structural strength. There isn't really anything in the roof of most vehicles that would allow you to put that kind of weight on there. But if these kids are looking at it, they may not think about cars and structural strength and engineering and so forth, let alone they're not thinking they need any insurance. And so if they came to me and I said, "You're putting that on a car," I go, well, "Where's your automotive engineer?" And if they go, "Why would we need one of those?" I go, "Because I don't think car will hold it. And if they argue with me about it, then as you put it, anybody who pushes back when you ask a legitimate question, they have set their mind that they're right and they don't need to know anymore. And one of the common elements of success of an entrepreneur is what they call curiosity, or the willingness to learn, to be coached, to figure out what they don't know. And anytime you start a business, by definition, you cannot know everything you need to know. That's why you have a team. That's why you have advisors. It's why you have contractors, depending upon the complexity of the project. So I start looking for who's on the team. That's what we talked about in the very first of the series on fact checking. Because if you have an incomplete team, it's an indication that maybe you don't have as much money as you think you need. Maybe you don't value other people's experience. Maybe you don't know enough to not know what you don't know or where to ask. And you didn't go about the trouble of asking. I've seen people go headlong into a brand new business, and you're like, well, did you think about this? And they're going, no, I didn't know anything about it. And I go, did you think to ask? Um, and if they go, no, I go, then that means you're a very dangerous person. You you could be one of those people driving their motorcycle between the cars in motion down the interstate, like I saw last week. And I'm thinking Darwin's theory of survival is going to manifest itself here at any moment. And because all it takes is someone changing a lane in front of that motorcycle for that to have a terrible outcome. So in economic feasibility, we talk about books and records, but that's more of a rear view mirror thing. That's where you've been, not necessarily where you want to go. So if you don't have something in place and you're doing something totally new, uh, you can still put things on the table. You can get in people who are risk experts. You can get in engineers. You can get in people who've been there, done that, like Eric and I have been for decades. And when we see something, we invariably look for what we don't know. It's part of the evaluation process. You're going, what could go wrong with this? What would stop this from being successful? And we assume that it's out there. It's like a lurking monster in the dark in the woods. And you're going, do I put up a fence? Do I carry a weapon? Do I get something that's going to scare them away? But you want to have your defenses in place, because life will not occur. Reality is not a straight line. Things will happen, and you need to be prepared to deal with them. And if you don't even prepare for what you don't know through insurance or staffing or more money in the bank to get you to the next day, then you're not thinking of this as a business. You're not really giving it the kind of strength that you need. Um, and then in economic feasibility, we do the best we can to project what kind of money we're going to need. And then, as Murphy says, maybe you need twice that amount or three times that amount. Don't wait till the last moment and go, oh, I need to raise money. There's nothing more frustrating to me than somebody shows up and says, hey, I need to raise funding. I go, okay, fine. When do you need it? And they'll go, yesterday. I go, well, are you just saying that jokingly, or do you really need the money yesterday? And they go, well, I owe all these people money, and I can't make payroll. They're going to take back the equipment I'm using to run my business. And I look at this situation, I'm going, well, even if we were to expedite a loan and you could qualify, simplest, easiest, shortest path to money, if you qualify, that's probably 2 weeks. So you're already 2 weeks overdue. If you show up in my office, then you need another 2 weeks to get all your paperwork together and then present it. And I'm working on a number of projects now that are not fundable, meaning they're not ready for funding because they don't have all the answers ready to answer questions of a banker, a private investor, a customer, or anyone else. So economic feasibility to me means that you've got these things put together. So you can answer questions. You're looking at different funding options. You have fallbacks built into your business planning, business strategy, and you have a team around you that can answer pretty much any question you might want to ask about your business, your markets, your products and services. So I'm looking for things that are outside the entrepreneur that give me comfort that there is planning, strategy, anticipation of what I don't know to go forward. And occasionally I may find another business which may serve as a comparison, like buying real estate, you look for comps. But most often that's hard to find, or it may be impossible because my business being new makes it different. And that means we have more things to deal with. So, Eric, um, if a person looks right, sounds right, tells you everything you want to hear, what do you look for outside of that person that would give you comfort that they have everything in order, that they are going to be feasible somewhere down the road when they hit whatever milestone they need to meet?
So I can use this example because it just happened recently. I look to see if there is a, I would call it a major character flaw. And this is something that you don't see this on a bank statement. You don't see this when you go to somebody to raise money for you. You don't see that part. So let me give an example. Just recently, there were some folks that wanted to do a cryptocurrency coin, so that what they could do is, and this first part is okay. They wanted to do a cryptocurrency coin and they wanted to tie it to the purchase of a mine, a gold mine. And the they went through this whole process where, and they had this whole tokenization model built up of how the longer you stay in and don't sell your coins, the more coin you got, and you got more coin actually as this developed, and as the mine, you bought another mine. They had this whole grand scheme of things, and it was actually quite well mapped out. So the very first thing I said was, okay, so you want to do a securities offering. Oh, no, we don't have to, because it's a token, it's not a security. And I said, well, you guys, it is a security. Here, I'm going to show you to a reference of the Howey Act and how the Howey Act applies. And I said, if you meet any one of those criteria, by virtue of any possible outcome, you're a security. That's just the way it is. Oh, no. This whole thing with Trump is going to change all that. It's blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, but don't you want to protect you and your investors? More importantly, you, from a problem. I said, because private placements don't protect investors. They only protect the issuer. That's it. And I said, so it seems to me that if you're talking about a project that is going to be 50 to 100 million US dollars, it would seem to me, and you all four of you are very well off businessmen. So you have a great deal of risk. I don't understand why you wouldn't put together a $50,000 PPM to raise money for this proper legally with all of the correct things. Well, we just don't have to. We've talked to legal counsel and they agree with us. I dropped that like a hot rock. Okay. And Carl, I think you remember this whole thing because you and I talked a little bit about it. I dropped this like a hot rock. I said, listen, guys, here's the deal. I realize that you think you're smarter than everybody. That's great. I wish you all the luck in the world. So one of these guys was an accountant, okay? And a very prominent accountant in Colorado. He since has lost his license. He's now in jail. He now has to pay back millions of dollars that he doesn't have. And basically, at 60 years old, he can't figure out why he's in so much trouble. Well, he should have known better. What it was, and when I talk about character, when it starts, it was purely an example of greed overloading common sense. So when you see that that's one example of a character flaw. When you see that, you have to walk away, because if they're willing to cheat the investor, then what are they going to do 6 months, a year, or 2 years from now? So if that helps, hopefully it does help. Those are some things you have to know.
Well, and you point out in your example, when something new is going on, you have to remember that the laws of the government that controls, regulates you may be behind you. They may not have caught up with where you're at because you've presented something brand new that regulators haven't had a chance to think about, haven't figured out how to tax you, haven't figured out how to make you conform to social norms. We could go down the list. And I look at laws that are attempting to govern innovation, kind of like the tide. Um, if you happen to be sitting on the shore at low tide, you could be sitting right next to the water and everything is really cool. There's a huge beach behind you. At high tide, you might be 5 feet underwater. And this happens a lot at the bleeding edge of innovation. And AI, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, we could go through a list of major technical innovations that are taking place, and you cannot assume that just because somebody's in office today that they're not going to rip that band-aid off and go back to something before, or they're not going to impose a bunch of stupid rules and regulations over the top because they're scared of what they don't know, which is what we're seeing with artificial intelligence ever so much, where you're like, well, how did you, so you want artificial intelligence to be good. So how are you going to mandate that by law? And yet they're out there trying to do it. And the same thing with crypto. I, like you, Eric, have looked at so many deals where people go, "We're going to get rich." I go, "Why?" "Well, we've got a crypto coin." I go, "What's the underlying value? What contributes to the value over time, so forth and so on?" And they go, "Well, it's because we have a coin." I go, "No, if that were true, then this coffee cup also has great value over time because it's a cup and I can use it. And you're telling me you're going to give me a coin which has no use, no underlying value, and yet the price of this is going to go up over time." And I get into these long arguments with people about there's got to be a value element in here somehow. And we get into these really strange, long, protracted arguments about how somehow value is, imbued to this thing simply because you want it to be. And I call that wishful thinking. It's very dangerous. It's not likely to lead to good results. And back to the character issue is, a lot of times I've said, well, yeah, you've got to treat this as a security. And they go, but I don't have to, I don't want to. And I said, it doesn't really matter, because if you will expend a few more bucks and you'll put your house in order, then you've put the bar where you want it. And if you conform to that, then you're fine, no matter how the government subsequently, decides how they want to handle this. And they're like, well, no. And you're going, so you don't care. You're basically going to in and out. You're going to flip this deal. You're going to get your money and go home. And then whoever's holding the bag when the music stops, when we're playing musical chairs, they're the ones who are going to be upset. And you think they're not going to think about you and dislike you, maybe hire legal counsel to come after you because you told them this was all going to be good, and they bought into it. They drank your Kool-Aid, and they're off doing stupid things, buying things that have no underlying value. That doesn't mean they can't sue you. I mean, we are very litigious here in the United States compared to other parts of the world. But other parts of the world will also bring lawsuits if they feel that they've been harmed, when they're looking to find someone to take care of them because they've been harmed. So, and so another observation that is interesting here is they said they talked to their attorney. I'm an attorney. I'm a licensed attorney, and one of the first things they tell you as an attorney is be careful what you don't know, because every time you're presented with a new situation, you are basically trying to take what happened in the past and carry it forward into this new situation. And you may be wrong. And the way to find that out is to get sued and find a court rule against you or a jury to make up a decision that's against you. And that happens all the time. So the net of it is that an attorney is an opinion. You paid for it, but the attorney is not the Supreme Court of the United States. The attorney could be wrong, and they could be wrong for all kinds of reasons that have nothing to do with the capability, the knowledge, the experience of the attorney. It's just that somebody else disagreed, and you're the one who suffers from that. So when I have an attorney who tells me, yes, you can do that, I first assume that he's telling me something I want to hear. And then I start asking myself, um, who else should I ask? Because I actually will go out and look for a contrarian opinion. I'll go, well, what could go wrong? This is a risk assessment, a risk analysis type of thing. And in economic feasibility, identifying risk, preparing for the risk, putting in safeguards, allocating the risk to somebody else through insurance, these are all part of dealing with what you don't know. Because again, from an investment standpoint, very, very important. When somebody invests, they're giving you the dollars today with the expectation they're going to get their money back in the future. And that future could be a few months down the road in a short term loan, or it could be a decade down the road in a strange venture capital investment or somewhere in between. But they expect to get their money back. And during that time, things will change. And they may change radically from a standpoint of markets, availability of financial money. I mean, right now, the capital market's in chaos because a lot of people made investments post COVID or pre COVID, and they can't get out. There's no exit. So there's no money available for them to reinvest. And this is still impacting people in how they make decisions today because they intended to roll the money over and that money's stuck. It can't get out of it. So the market's a mess. There's less people making fewer investments for the same number of people that still need funding. And as we look at economic feasibility today in this level of chaos, we have to anticipate, we have to presume that there are more things in motion that are going to impact us for any individual business we get into. And so with that, I put that into the list of, well, how many opinions do I need to be economically feasible? Well, I may talk to an accountant, I may talk to a lawyer, I may talk to an insurance adjuster or a risk specialist. I may find other people out there who are the ones who deal with threats, with risk, with things that could go wrong. And at the end of the day, over the last four sessions of this successful funding show, we talked about people, the business structure itself. We talked about technology and then market acceptance. And all those include risk of things that can go wrong. But the biggest problem that I've seen, as we've talked about, Eric, is being overly optimistic about how quickly we're going to become profitable. Um, if you've pre-sold everything, if you've got it all papered up, if it's all inked and contracts so that when you open the door for business, customers are lined up around the block, products already sold, they're just picking up orders they've already paid for. That's the kind of optimal situation you look for, but it doesn't work that way. Um, so you have to do the best you can to project where you're going to go so that when the investor comes back and says, I'm ready to get my money out of your deal, you're ready to help them make that happen. And they're going to be happy with whatever the outcome is because you are profitable, because you are feasible. So I look for all the different people that can tell me what can go wrong and I want to start checking all the boxes. Have I prepared? Have I allowed enough time? Do I have fallbacks in place if things don't go as I hope for? Because hope can kill you. You need to be very, very realistic about what can and cannot happen.
Yeah, Carl, that's really a good point. And going for a little further on that, it's an old saying, but it's really true. You can wish in this hand and you can poop in this hand, and which one fills up first, right? And there's a huge misconception, I think, of many business people, and some of them are very successful, but they still, they've made success by luck, not by engineering. So the understanding is, oh, I have a very profitable business. Well, no, what they have is a very positive cash flow business. And positive cash flow doesn't mean you're profitable. And there's a huge distinction there, and getting back to people who have good personal character, okay? Because that's really what we were kind of getting at. So if you have great personal character, you're going to recognize when the accountant says you lost $10 last month. But no, I didn't lose $10. I created $10 into my pocket. No, you lost $10. And because the cash flow is more important than what the financial statement says, but the financial statement, this goes further, right? The financial statement, the balance sheet goes to the banker. If the banker can't see how you are going to be profitable rather than positive cash flow, your chances of getting any money out of him is about zero. So, but why would that be any different to a venture capitalist or anybody else? It isn't really any different. But if you show I have this positive cash flow and I'm going to turn this into a profitable business that makes sense, everybody gets a lot more comfortable. So understand, or what I've seen often, and I'm sure Carl, you have too, the proof of character is, I got what you're telling me about profitability versus cash flow. I'm going to take less money, or I'm going to redirect the cash flow to make it be, I can redirect this cash flow somehow through all kinds of accounting methods, by the way, so that the bottom line shows increased profitability over time. And I think that gets back to, isn't that another one of your go no goes? Okay, you've got this cash flow, you wanted it, you've got it. Now, what are you going to do with it? Are you just going to suck the thing dry now, or are you going to reinvest in yourself?
Well, yeah, and it gets back to what is the goal of the business. If you're running the business just for yourself and you don't need anybody else's money, you don't need any investment, you don't need to borrow money from the bank, then all this conversation we just set to the side. Point of the matter is, if you do need that money to start the business, to grow the business, then you have to satisfy the person who's holding the money that they're going to get what they want out of this investment. Even if it's a loan from the bank wants to be repaid. If it's an investor, they want their money back. They're not giving it to you and flipping a coin whether they're going to get the money back or not. They absolutely believe when they give you the money that they will get it back. And when they don't, they will be disappointed. And if they're disappointed because you engaged in behavior which was unacceptable, it was not professional, it was not thoughtful, then they'll think, what kind of goof did I give the money? I really made a mistake here. And then they may decide that maybe you did something wrong with the money. Maybe that you should have done something different, that you were less than a standard of care. And they're going to ask you to pay back the investment out of your personal pocket. As you said with the guy who did the gold mine, He's now facing civil, suits, claims, judgments that says you have to pay the money back, and he's in no position to do that.
Right.
He's probably financially devastated. He's created his own what I call nuclear waste zone around himself that he may never dig out of the hole. And but you made another observation, which I think is very, very important. Some people are successful, and I have to say, so I'm sometimes envious or jealous of them because of the great success that they had. But they were in the right place, right time. They were riding the wave. They got in front of a new market trend. They had a technology that was jumped into the market. And this is what all the papers and media want to talk about. But this is less than of 1% of all the businesses out there that have this phenomenal success. And then we have a bunch of them that do really well, and they're good, but they don't make such a splashy thing that the media wants to necessarily cover them. And then we have a bunch of businesses that grind it out year over year, and they accumulate wealth over time. But it really isn't a very attractive story because they're working hard to make the money, and they are successful making the money. But I think the distinction that you raised is that some people don't understand the cause and effect. They're going, look, I made a lot of money, therefore I must be smart. I must have done all the stuff. And you're like, let's take a step back and take a look at this. Did you cause this to happen, or were you in the right place, right time? Was it a market force that happened? Was it somebody else doing all the work? There's so many times somebody comes on, applies for a position on a project or management team. They're going, look, I got sales up by 10 times, 100 times over the last 4 or 5 years for my company. I'm going, you did this all by yourself. It's my first question. Very sympathetic. Because I go, so nobody else did any of this, and sometimes they're like the lightning rod that made everything happen, but almost never is that true. It is a team thing. Somebody else did a lot of the work, something else happened, things that you can't really control and can't influence just happened, and they were the beneficiary of all that. When somebody starts a business and they've been successful in another business, I even am a little spooked because I'm concerned they're going to carry over some level of confidence, some belief that they caused everything to happen that may not be true in this new business because they've never done this new business before. And everything they knew or learned in the old business may not apply to the new business. So in some ways, I'm concerned that they're going to start implementing things they think worked in the old business, which they should have started with a clean slate instead of necessarily imposing upon this new business everything they thought they knew before. So as we're looking at this, Eric, thinking about all these different things, what would an investor, what would they look at when you lay stuff on the table, whether it's the executive summary, a PowerPoint, the full private placement memorandum? What do you think they're going to look at that tells them that this is economically feasible? And I'm going to challenge you. I don't want something that's been around for 5 years. I want something that's 1 year old or less, or it's pre-revenue. So we don't have enough history that we can use that as a good framework.
So I break it down into basically 3 things that you've got to have, and they have to be right. So the very first thing is an introduction letter of some kind. You've got to have something neat and tidy, not more than a page. If it's more than a page, nobody's going to read it. You immediately went into the bit bucket. So a good introduction letter, basically, who are you? What are you doing? What have you done in the past? And by the way, this is our new idea. So a reasonable introduction letter. The second thing is they're going to want to see a slide deck. And I'm not talking a PowerPoint with 50 slides. You lost all interest. They don't have time. These people are looking for every possible way to throw you out the door because they get hundreds of these a day. So a good slide deck, maybe 10 at the most. And with something that's easy to read, dumb it down to Maybe it's pictures and arrows. So they can go, oh, I get it. And then the last thing is a well written PPM. Understand they're going to read the company introduction page, and that's it. If they like it, they're signing it. All the rest of that stuff, these guys and gals, companies, venture, they've seen thousands and thousands of these, and they don't care. They realize it's all boilerplate nonsense anyway. But that introduction to your company, the who, how, who, what, why, when, and where, in that first sentence, or actually paragraphs, which is also not more than a page, that's where it's make or break. And then they go and they sign it. If they like those three things, then they're going to sign your deal. And it's a courting process, right, Carl? I mean, I've never seen any situation where you gave an introduction letter because you just wanted to get some interest to see. So that's your first thing of weeding out interest, no interest. Then comes the slide deck, or maybe it's the slide deck first, whatever you feel comfortable with. But that's the first courting process. And the final courting process is, here's my PPM, sign the subscription agreement so I can get your money. But I think people forget about that. And what one thing, if I've got just a second, it looks like I do. So over the weekend, I heard a interview with Sir Branson. It was excellent, and he goes through most of the things we're talking about. But business integrity was the number one thing. Now, here's a guy that literally started with very little, and he made a lot of money for himself and all of his team members in the very first deal. And he did it because he wanted to be socially responsible. And if you read anything about him and you want to emulate what he's doing, everything he does, yes, it's not all profitable, but everything does has social accountability to it. And if it doesn't have social accountability to it, he doesn't do it. It's a very interesting dialogue he has. So I'd strongly encourage anybody in looking to be a small business person, listen to his interviews, read his book, and he's sort of that proof that you can do it. But if you do it wrong, you're probably going to fail. If you do it socially responsible, hey, you got a pretty good chance. So,
Yeah. So many things in there. We're going to run out of time. But
sorry about that.
no, it's not you. It's just the topic is huge. In that one pager, what I want to see is I want to see a very simple investment model. It says if you put up $1 in 3 years, we expect that we're going to be able to give you your dollar back plus a certain percentage if we do a number of things. And we're going to try to help you get your money back because that's your purpose. I've seen too many slide decks talk about the products and the services, and they assume a massive hopeful, we're going to sell a ton of these things. And I go, how do you know that? You've never brought this product to market before. And the more you lean on how innovative your product or service is, the more spooked I get when you start making these huge assumptions that you're going to sell to everybody, because there's so many reasons why that won't happen. So I like it very simple. I've seen people, and I've got a number of ones I'm working on now where they're going, hey, give me money and we're going to do well and you're going to make money. And you're going like, how, when, why? Where do I get my money back? And they skip over all that because they're like talking about, you should be happy to be on my team. You should be happy. You should be privileged to give me money. And um, and maybe it's not that bad. Maybe they're just so in love with themselves and what they're going to do. But the thing is, the investor has to look at this from an economic standpoint. I'm going to put up my money. I want my money back. I want more, because if I'm not getting more, I'm going to look at another deal. And even if I am advocating, planet purpose over people, what is it? It's people and planet and purpose over profits. I want to see the metrics for that. What am I getting out of that? What's the world getting out of that? You can't just assume that good things will happen to me, that's the reason for me to walk away from looking at a deal. I go, if you have no idea where you're going and you're just hopeful, you just think that you're going to get there because you want to. Um, that to me tells me you're not thinking through the problem. You're not thinking of all the things that need to be done, and this is going to lead to a bad outcome. So anyway, Eric, thank you for being on the show today. Hang on for after we sign off because we have a project that I want to talk to you about. Um, this is the Successful Funding Show. I put it on every week on Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. If you have a topic that you think would be good for us to talk about on the show, let me know. If you have a story that you think would fit into helping people learn about funding, an experience, your own things you've gone through as a business or as an advisor to a business. We have lots and lots of topics. We've been doing this for over a year now, and I don't think we'll ever run out of topics. And if we thought we were, all we'd have to do is pick up the newspaper, and there'll be another 4 or 5 new things that we need to worry about. Thank you all today for being in the audience. This will be recorded on LinkedIn and YouTube, so you can see it if you were not able to listen to the live program. And we'll see you next week on the Successful Funding Show. Take care.
You bet. Thanks, Carl. You're going to call me, right?
I'm